GOP lawmakers are grilling Weingarten over her group's involvement on slowing down the reopening of schools during the coronavirus pandemic.
Now, in her opening statement, Weingarten was adamant that the act was focused on opening schools safely.
We know that kids learn best in person, so opening schools safely, even as the pandemic surged, guided the AFT's every action. And I'm grateful to set the record straight. From the earliest days of COVID, the AFT knew that safety was the pathway to opening schools and keeping them open. We, along with parents and administrators and health officials, we needed clear science-based guidance to keep students and staff safe in school.
All right, let's bring in our panel to discuss. Author of Woke Army and Senior Fellow Independent Women's Network, Asra Nomani, and Director Center for Education Policy, and Mark A. Colocotrones Fellow in Education, Lindsey Burke. Lindsey, I'm going to start with you here. Do you think that Weingarten will take any responsibility for her role in keeping schools closed, despite what we just heard?
No, look, she's not setting the record straight, as she said. She's rewriting history. And we can look back because it's fairly recent history. Randi Weingarten claims that safety was really guiding the union, the AFT's actions to reopen schools. Yet even in August of 2020, when the American Academy of Pediatrics was encouraging schools to reopen, she opposed it. She opposed Secretary DeVos's vow to reopen schools. And look, we can look over the past few years, even recently, where the Chicago's teachers union had said that the push to reopen schools was, quote, rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. The union had demanded wealth taxes and Medicare for all and bans on charter schools. They lined up fake body bags outside of DC public schools to protest reopening. So again, she's not setting the record straight. She is rewriting history. Her union opposed school reopening at nearly every turn.
Asra, I want to ask you about this. I mean, the teachers' unions, they say that they should have had some input into the reopening of the schools because they're keeping the teachers safe. Do you agree with that? That argument that the teachers' union should have had some sort of connection with the CDC in determining these guidelines?
Well, the teachers' union is a lobby. So every lobby gets a voice in legislation and policy, and they are one voice. But what they did is they dominated the room, and it was really well put. Randi Weingarten thinks we're all going to have collective amnesia about the learned and lived reality that we had in 2020. Not only were there body bags, but she would have teachers union representatives carrying tombstones, and coffins to really scare people into thinking that there was going to be this, wide massacre really of children and teachers. And she loves to wave documents around. Well, I've got the 990 for the American Federation for Teachers, and there they are sitting on New Jersey Avenue, an outsized labor union exerting too much power over policy. And she thinks that we've got amnesia about all of the shenanigans that they pulled. But we remember because we watched local representatives in town after town, Fairfax County, I'll never forget, they always got the first few minutes of the school board meeting and they got to argue to shut the schools down. And so this little alliance that she now declares retroactively that she had with parents is also bogus. She's a general in the woke army, and her agenda is simple gaslighting. That's what it is. And that's what she did today at the hearing. It was outrageous.
Yeah. And Lindsey, how much do you think, if she wasn't communicating with parents, which it seems very much like she was not, how much do you think she was communicating with others like, say, I don't know, Dr. Fauci, when it came to making those decisions to schools being closed down and those strict distance learning guidelines?
Well, that was abundantly clear in the hearing today when Weingarten was pressed on her interactions with the CDC in particular. It was clear that the CDC was significantly influenced by edits provided by the American Federation of Teachers to the CDC that really drove how the CDC communicated whether or not it was safe to reopen schools at a time when we knew it was safe to reopen schools. And so she had a lot of power when it came to that CDC guidance, which really was not school reopening guidance, it was school closure guidance. And I think it's important to remember, too, that this school closure guidance was coming out at a time when private schools were reopening their doors. Private schools open on average a year before public schools open their doors, largely, again, at the behest of the teachers' unions to keep their doors closed. And we know exactly what the impact has been on children now. Unfortunately, we know that kids have lost 2 decades of progress on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, so they're years behind in learning. And if you compare those students in public schools to children who had access to private schools, private Catholic schools in particular, while kids across the country were losing a year of learning, kids in Catholic schools actually improved during the pandemic. They gained a year's worth of learning. And a lot of that comes back to schools being open, their doors were open to in-person instruction, private Catholic schools. They were responsive to the needs of parents and families.
Yeah, and it's sad, we're looking at these hearings and seeing who should be to blame, but at the same time, the true victims, of course, are all those kids who suffered during that time. So really appreciate your insights, Asra Nomani and Lindsey Burke. Thank you.
Thank you.